There we go. Okay, welcome everybody to part 2 of our 3-part series on Pirkey Avot, the wisdom of our ancestors. Big apologies for our tech problem. Just so you know, Bobby and I set this up so that you would not need a password, but Zoom updated last night and changed all the settings. It's very unhelpful, but that is what happened. We are a resilient community, so I appreciate all the people who somehow made your way in, and we will just go till 12:30, and I hope people can stay instead of ending at 12:15. So let us start with our, oh, people are still coming in here. That's good. There we go. Welcome, Susan Thompson. Okay, let us start with our Torah blessing. Same as candle lighting, but ending la'asok b'divrei Torah. Susan, I'm glad you made it in. We just started. Let's do it together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu
melech haolam,
asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Thank you for the inspiration to immerse ourselves, to soak ourselves in lifelong learning. And today is the final day of Pesach. It's also a Yizkor day. So it's a day, it's one of the 5 times a year we have a special service of remembrance. Diane, did you have a quick question? Yeah?
Just the technical thing. I think since we don't have an assist today, I think everyone should just mute themselves, please.
Yeah, and when it's your turn to talk, you can unmute. That's a good idea. Yeah, so because it's the last day of Passover, and also happy Easter to anyone whose family is also celebrating that in our interfaith world. But we will be doing a little moment for Yizkor remembrance at the end of our teaching and learning today. And thank you to Karen for that beautiful idea. We'll just say Kaddish together. So anybody who wants to say Kaddish at the end will have that opportunity. I will lead it on the community's behalf. Okay. To review briefly what we did in the first session of our Pirkei Avot series. That was an orientation to what is Pirkei Avot, where is it situated in our sacred texts, but we're now actually within the time period that Jewish communities all around the world in synagogues and in learning spaces are studying this particular text. And that starts the second day of Passover and goes all the way to Shavuot. And so many, many communities have Pirkei Avot study sessions and classes now. So we're in really good company. We're like in the zone now. And this is a chapter in the Mishna, which is the first part of the Talmud. So we understand that Mishna is the first couple hundred years of kind of oral tradition that got codified in 200 CE. And then became the basis for another 300 years of rabbinic conversations that eventually got codified as the Talmud. So the Talmud consists of the Mishnah, which we're studying a chapter of it, and it consists of the Gemara. And all of this took place at what you could call an interregnum in Jewish history, the destruction of the old ways and the new ways not quite yet in sight. Nobody knew what Judaism would look like after the destruction of the Second Temple. The Italian philosopher Anthony Gramsci wrote about this concept of the interregnum. Old ways crumbling, we can't yet see the birth of the new way, what's going to be next, but the seeds are there. And we can see that these rabbis that eventually became the Mishnah, their conversations over 200 years, they were the seeds of the new way. We talked about last time, the temple was the old way. So the temple in Jerusalem was a building, and the process was that the Am Yisrael, the ordinary Israelites, would take their best fruits and animals and go sacrifice them. There was no other Judaism. There was not home practice. There weren't holidays at home. No, if you weren't at the temple, you wouldn't blow a shofar or wave the lulav or celebrate, Rosh Hashanah. You didn't do anything. There was no such thing as a Judaism of the people. It was run by the elite in a particular building at the center of Jerusalem, the temple. So once there wasn't a temple, it was a big mess. But we can see that even before there wasn't a temple, the seeds of the future were beginning to develop. And in particular, Rabbi Hillel, who we spoke about last week, and this week we're going to read some of his wisdom, he actually lived before the destruction of the temple. You see, he was born before Jesus was born in Babylonia. And he eventually, as an adult, came to the land of Palestine. That's what it was called under Roman times, to study. And so all of his conversations and teachings and wisdom he didn't have any idea how valuable they would end up being to the Jewish people, because that's what the new Judaism was built on after the destruction of the Second Temple. For those of you really worried about today's news, and it's hard to be human if you're not worried about today's global news and news in this country, I would say we're in one of those interregnum periods right now, where the old ways weren't working, which was basically the idea of the world as a market. It was basically about expanding markets and the power of capital. The old ways are crumbling. And because the old ways weren't protecting people in our lives around the world, those people vote in the strong man, which is happening all around the world. But we don't yet know what the new ways are going to be. And those new ways are here, even though we can't really see what it's going to be. Like what is being built now that's going to become the future? And to me, that's the one sign of hope, is that back in those days when the temple wasn't yet destroyed, but things were looking really bad, the Jews were very, very divided, totally in factions. And I talked last week a little bit about what those factions were, but the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the Essenes, the Zealots, the Jews were fighting each other and were very, very divided. Just like in this country and world, the world is so polarized today. There's very little collective spirit at the moment. And you can see the old ways crumbling. But what are the seeds of the future? Hopefully it's some of the things we know how to do, like how to build good communities where there's actual care and support. And, hopefully some of these things are seeds of the future, wherever you're doing those things, seeds that will build a better future at some point. Karen, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just had a question about the temple. If Judaism existed solely around the temple, what did Jews out of Israel do? Like Iranian Jews or German Jews or
any yet?
There weren't any?
Except in Babylonia, because remember, there had been the first destruction of the temple. I mean, okay, just to swoop back in history. When we were in Egypt, historically, not all the Jews ever left Egypt. So there was always an Egyptian Jewish community from ancient times. Then most of the Jewish people did move to the land of Palestine and had biblical Judaism with the Torah and the temple for 1,000 years. But there was the Egyptian community still thriving. And then after the destruction of the first temple in 586 BCE, some Jews were exiled into Babylonia and some stayed there. So there always was a small exiled community of Jews somewhere or other. Also, there was a little community in Africa that was pre-settlement in Israel. So there were little pockets of communities, but
no European Jews.
Oh, no, because that all happened after the destruction of the Second Temple. Diaspora Judaism had to happen because the Jews were no longer basically in Israel. The Jews were dispersed. And especially a little bit after the destruction of the temple was the Bar Kokhba uprising. And from then on, which was something like 129 CE, something like that, So the destruction of the Second Temple is 70 CE. The Bar Kokhba uprising took some years, but it's like around 130 CE. And after that, there's basically a tiny remnant of Jews who always were in Palestine and stayed. But almost all Jews are diaspora Jews from that moment on. And that's when we settle what's now Syria, Iraq, Iran, Northern Africa all over, Europe, and then spread from there to Eastern Europe. So diaspora Judaism is what we've had for the last 2,000 years now.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so really important kind of structure to the Jewish history here, because the Mishnah takes place right at the cusp of these changes. So it's in that gap where the old ways are crumbling and the new ways aren't really built yet, but Hillel and these rabbis having these conversations that become the Mishnah, one of which is chapters is Pirkei Avot, the wisdom of the ancestors. They become the building blocks of what we know as Judaism, which is not temple-based Judaism. We would not recognize the Judaism that took place in the land of Israel for those 1,000 years. It wouldn't look like Judaism to us. I mean, who's going to take their best animal for sacrifice? Who wants to be first in line? Who's got some crops you'd like to offer up to the Kohanim, the priests, so you could feed them and feed God? We wouldn't recognize it. It would not look Jewish. And I think similarly, the Judaism of the future is not necessarily going to look recognizable to us. But we have enormous continuity. And we share a lot of stories that keep us as a coherent people. And this is one of the questions we're going to delve into today in a little bit. So I want to say one more thing. As the Talmud began to be created, which is what we're talking about now, the seeds of the new Judaism, there were two different streams that ended up integrating and becoming the Talmud. And one of them was the stream of wisdom sayings and stories. And the other was the stream of legal debates, like what's the right way to do this? Like questions of things like, what time do you say the Shema? And are you allowed to carry things on Shabbat? Or would that be violating the work prohibition? Those are legal debates. And the rabbis would sit around and they'd make an agreement about what's the law. So Judaism developed with these two intertwined streams of stories, values, wisdom sayings, and law. So how many people were able to read the texts that I shared before this class? Okay, we're going to also read them out loud here because they're just a few sentences. But for the people who read them, would you say they are wisdom or law? Which of those streams would you fit those sayings into? Enid, you can unmute and say why you think whatever you think.
Oh, okay. The first two, I think, are wisdom. Although, and the third one could be a combination of both, because it says you're not responsible to finish the work, but neither are you free to desist from it, which could have some kind of legal implication, I think, if you really want to read into it that way.
Enid, do you have the text in front of you right this minute?
Yes.
Okay, can you read us the three wisdom statements? It's just 3 sentences, but I want to make sure everybody has access to them.
Sure. And I assume we'll be discussing the first one I have a question about, but not right now.
All
Okay.
3. I just want to.
Yeah, I understand. Rabbi Hillel, used to say, if I am not for me, who will be for me? And when I And when I am for myself alone, what am I? And if not now, then when? The second one says, Hillel says, Dear Hillel, do not separate yourself from the community. The third one, Rabbi Tarfon, used to say, it is not your responsibility to finish the work, but neither are you free to desist from it.
Okay, thank you, Enid. Yeah, so I mean, the exact cutoff line between what's a law and what's a story, or a wisdom statement is maybe a little bit fuzzy, but basically the law was based on things that came from the Torah. Like if the Torah said, you shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk, then the rabbis had to make rules about how you were going to make sure that nobody boiled a kid in its mother's milk, because what did that even mean? And, in the law, what they did was create a fence around the Torah. So they went way beyond what you'd have to do to follow, don't boil a kid in its mother's milk. And they invented kashrut, separating meat and milk. But law has to have some way of, ideally, like its guidance towards implementing it. It sort of tells you more like, well, how are you actually supposed to do this thing so that we would know whether you were doing it or not doing it? Are you breaking the law or not breaking the law? And then even that is fuzzy and has to be argued in court sometimes. So, it's never over. But the story wisdom stream of it is called Agadah. Agadah. And the legal stream of it is called Halacha. And in general, what we're reading, these Pirkei Avot quotes, are Agadah. They are the stories and the wisdom. They're these pithy statements, but they're not legal rulings. So now that we've situated this, well, I want to say one more thing about this, that right at this period, sort of around the 1st century, when all this change is happening, you can see in our tradition a shift from supernatural intervention, miracles. There's no more of that happening. And instead, there's the human mind kind of latching on and reasoning it out and talking to each other, making agreements. So there's a real shift. I mean, the supernatural stories that go all the way through the Torah and the other books of the Bible, basically, they're all done by now. And we shift to a different process, really, which is about how are humans going to work this out and live a life together? And there's no more, you don't really get the supernatural interventions anymore. They're going to save the day. So like a post-biblical book, which we just read, was the book of Esther, that it's not part of the Torah, and it's not part of the prophets that were all during that 1,000 years when there was a temple. Doesn't even have God in it. No God. God's name is not mentioned once, because the book of Esther is taking place in an era where God is more hidden. And so that's the era we're in now. We're still in that era. Some people call it the rabbinic era, because all of a sudden rabbis are being invented. So anyway, it's not the biblical era, and we're not focused on the temple. It's the rabbinic 2,000 years, and we may be moving into the next iteration now. We'll see. Because once again, the Jewish community is very, very divided, as we can see, very, very divided. And, we'll see what comes next. So Hillel also contributed to the halachic stream of Talmud creation, because he came up with the foundational set of 7 rules for interpreting Torah to make it into law. And that's a whole different class, but it's very interesting. How did they take a Torah idea and turn it into a law? And Hillel helped he helped invent that process. So it wasn't like he was just Agadic. a storyteller and a wisdom preacher. He also was a legal scholar. Okay, so let us go to our first quote. Well, let me stop there and see, does anybody have a comment or question? And then we're going to move into our actual quotes. Enid.
Just a question. I remember my father used to talk a lot about Pirkei Avot, but then it was called the wisdom of our fathers. Has that just been changed to ancestors because of today's world? Was that the original?
Yeah, I said something about this in the first class. Pirkei Avot can be translated many different ways because Avot literally means fathers, and it's also the Hebrew word for ancestors, because in Hebrew,
Okay. Right.
the gendered language, so the plural becomes all ancestors. So also,
Thank you.
it can be wisdom of the fathers, ethics of the fathers, sayings of the fathers, sayings of
Right. Yeah.
wisdom. There's just a lot of ways you see it translated. Debbie.
So many years ago, I mean, decades ago, I went to hear a Jewish scholar, a resident scholar at a synagogue, who did a talk about the fact that ancient Hebrew actually did not have a word that meant he or she when it came to God. It was just parent. And to call God he, this ancient Hebrew scholar said, is a misinterpretation. So maybe that explains that.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. Anybody else have comment or question? Okay, great. So let's dive into our first saying there. How about somebody read it again so we know what statement we're talking about here? Anybody volunteer to read our first wisdom statement? Okay, well, Enid's got it right there. Go ahead, Eden.
Rabbi Hillel used to say, if I am not for me, who will be for me? And when I am for myself alone, what am I? And if not now, then when?
Okay, thank you. This is such a powerful quote. We hear it frequently. Has everybody heard this before? Raise your hand if you have heard this quote. Yeah, it's a very, very powerful piece of wisdom there. Fran? But you have to unmute.
I think that's a new thing with Zoom. I didn't enable my hand being raised. I just held my hand up, and after about 20 seconds,
Yeah.
it appeared on my, there it goes again.
Wow, Zoom is using AI.
Yeah. And in fact, there's a blinking white light at the top. It says recording with AI. You can undo that apparently some way.
Oh my goodness. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Is that what you wanted to say?
No, I didn't want to say anything.
Oh, I see.
I was just answering how many people have heard this. I was like, yeah, I have.
I thinks it knows more than us what we're doing. Okay.
Yeah.
So if I am not for myself, who am I? Right? You've got to have a self. You've got to stand up for yourself. You have to be, have an identity and have some integrity. But if I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? So this is the first question I have about this powerful quote. At this, I'm going to ask 3 people to ponder upon this. At this moment in time, which of those 3 parts of that statement are you most drawn to? Are you most drawn to right now? If I am not for myself, who am I? And what does that mean to you? Like, why? Or are you most drawn to, if I am only for myself, who am I? Or what am I? Or if not now, when? Now, Hillel did it as an integrated, you have to take all of those into account. So I don't really want to make it totally binary, but just for the purposes of exploration, what are you most drawn to right now? 3 people. So let me have some volunteers. I see Diane. You can unmute. And then Anne, And then Susan. 3 people.
I'm doing this from memory because I don't have it written unless it's in the chat. But I would say certainly the part about being in community. If not, can you repeat the second part?
I'm just saying it from my memory, but if I am only for myself, who am I? No, it starts with,
Right.
if I am, the first one is if I am not for myself, who am I? The second one,
Right.
I am only for myself, what am I? And the third one is, if not now, when?
Okay. Do I have to pick one? Because I would, if I have to pick one, I'd say the middle one, because it resonates for me about community and the obligation that you can't exist in your own for yourself. You just can't exist for yourself. It's an imperative. It's the human condition to be for others. I could talk about the third, but I think the second one is the one that resonates.
Most drawn to the second one. And when you think about, do you think about it as meaning, if I am not for me, who I am, I just as an individual, or do you think sort of as a group of people in any way, shape, or form? Like if I am not for women, or if I am not for LGBT, or if I am not for, some identity thing, if I am not for the Jews or whatever. Or do you think of it as an individual thing? If I am not for myself, who am I?
Are you asking me, Diane?
I'm asking
Or
that. I'm asking.
I never in my whole time of life that I've heard that phrase ever thought of it as anything but the individual.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I think people have a wide range of interpreting these statements. So thank you. That's really helpful. Okay, what are you most drawn to, Anne? You can unmute.
There we go. If not now, when?
And
Because I feel, as you said, we're at some kind of cusp. I'm not sure what it is, but I don't know what comes next. But I know we or I cannot stand waiting for something to happen in hopes that somehow this mess will straighten out itself, that now is the time to act, whatever that's going to look like, instead of putting it off and thinking, well, we'll get to that, we'll fix it.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so you see it as sort of, this is a call that this is your moment. Like now is the time. It's only going to get worse if people don't act now to make it better.
Mm-hmm.
That looks like. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Susan.
Well, I'm torn between the second one and the third one. I think maybe I lean a little bit more to the second one for community, because I think I wouldn't want to do something. I wouldn't want to be only for myself. I'd want to be cognizant of that. But if I was just by myself, I wouldn't be taking care of other people's needs as well as mine. And I need that community. I think we don't have strength alone for our whole lives if we are not in relationship. But I agree with Ann about not now, when. And it should be now. But I think as you form into a community, you gain strength,
Uh-huh.
and there's strength. I think of that picture or a story about if you're one stick of wood, it's easily broken or something. But if the sticks are bound together, they're not. So I think that if we're bound together with a purpose together, then that will lead us to, if not now, when. And the when obviously is now.
Okay, really interesting. Some people see this also as a statement that, well, if the Jews aren't going to watch out for the Jews, nobody's going to. If we're not for ourselves, who will be for us? And see the second statement as, if we're not making sure everybody has what they need, safety and freedom and food and shelter and just for the collective good, nobody's safe. That saying, like, no, Until everybody's safe, nobody is safe. So I think this statement is used in different kinds of ways, and it's really kind of just interesting to see what it means to people here. What questions would you ask Hillel if you could interview Hillel now? What would you want to know from Hillel? Enid? You're still on mute. Enid, you're still muted.
Takes a bit for the finger to get to the right place.
Uh,
Okay. Yeah, I would ask Hillel, I want to know a little bit more about what he meant when he says, if I am not for me, who will be for me? What does that say? And I'm not clear on that. You had something to say about something? Oh, can I? Is that if I am not for me, who will be for me? Is that if you are for yourself, are you being selfish? Or I'm not clear. And I would want to know exactly what he meant by that.
That's really interesting, Enid. I mean, how I take it is if I don't even believe in myself that I'm of value and worth, protection and resources and respect, if I'm not even for myself, how could I expect anybody else to stand up for me? So that it's sort of like you have to believe in yourself. That's interesting, though, that there could be further.
No, well, I mean, it's because somebody said that to me, and I don't buy it. But I would want to know what his interpretation,
Good
what
question.
he meant by that question.
Okay.
It brings up a lot of feelings. Yeah, I agree with what you just said as well, but that would be my question.
Okay, who else? Karen, you have a question for Rabbi Hillel.
Well, I mean, I don't have a question, but I read his statement like the mother with a child on an airplane when the oxygens come down. And they tell the mother, you do yours first, or else you can't do your baby. And I think, like, for all of us, if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't take care of anyone. That's how I read his statement.
That's beautiful, Karen. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah. He was a really wise guy, he really understood a lot of things. Okay,
Even before airplanes.
Even before airplanes. Okay, Fran, a question for Rabbi Hillel.
Yeah, I would ask him where he came down on that. What was his identity that he said, if I am not for myself, what am I? What was he implying there? What am I? Am I without identity? Am I without nation? Am I without family? Who am I? What am I? I would ask him, what are you?
Yeah. And if you think about it, I think we have a real understanding now that identity is complex, that you can be a lot of things at once. You can be American, you can be Jewish, you can be a gender, you can be a profession, you can be a geographic something. You could be a lot, you could be a Democrat, you could be a Republican, you could be an independent, you could be a lot of multiple things. So like what part of his for me is he talking about? Like if I am not for me, well, you're a lot of complexity. So what does that mean? Really interesting questions. Okay. So that question actually, Fran, moved us beautifully to the next wisdom quote. And Patricia, thank you for putting them in the chat box. That's really helpful. So the second wisdom quote, do we have a volunteer to read it? Enid, we're back to you.
Well, why not? Okay. Hillel says, do not separate yourself from the community. I mean, I think sounds obvious, but others
it's okay. It's not as obvious as it looks. Do not separate yourself from the community. Okay, what community? Do not separate yourself from, and who is the community? Let's think about that. Back in Hillel's time, let's just say he's saying, do not separate yourself from the Jewish community. Well, the Jewish community was very, very divided. So what did that mean? Like, what community did he not want to separate himself from? I don't know that that's what he was even talking about. He could have been talking about, do not separate yourself from the people who study Torah in the morning, or, I don't know, like, what community is he talking about? So when you hear, do not separate yourself from the community, what does that mean to you? Let's hear from 3 people. What community? And what's it asking you to do? If you were to take this wisdom quote to heart, do not separate yourself from the community, what would that mean to you? Who would you not want to separate yourself from, or feel that it was a moral issue that you should try very hard to not be separated from it? Because these are kind of ethical guidance for how to live. Diane.
Well, I think it goes to my statement before, which is community is writ large. It's everyone around us. It is the sense of, as I said before, you can't exist without community, in my opinion. And even if you're a hermit, even if you're an introvert, there in some respects, there is the other. And I think that this is a way of putting oneself in an imperative of context, that you are not alone. You must acknowledge that you are part of something greater.
Yeah. No, I really love that, because it's about the interconnectedness of being. But if you think about it, you could probably exist without ever sitting intimately with a Republican or with a settler Jew. Is this telling you don't separate yourself from the people who you're most polarized with? Is that your community? The community? Like, we all need interconnection to be alive. That's true, but we don't need everybody at the table. Or
I think that's a false start of a question, because you're talking about politics, and I don't think that's a fair perspective on community. I think.
Okay, good. So what do you think he means by the community, like the human community?
Okay. Well, it's funny. As we're sitting here, I'm thinking you could be whoever wrote On Walden Pond. I mean, you could be in community insofar as you're caring about the birds. Well, Phyllis is laughing because she knows I don't know, but I forget who it is. Emerson. Somebody shake their head. Thoreau. Thank you. Anyway, point is that his community was the nature around him, and being able to share with others about that experience. So it's not necessarily have to be, but in my opinion, it has to be. It is human driven, but it should be animals, flora, fauna, the earth too.
You read it in a very inclusive way here, as the community really, it's the community of humanity, or of all species, or of life on earth, or something like that. Do not separate yourself from it. Yeah, it's really interesting, because in Hillel's context,
What
They-
the Jewish?
the Jew- they only cared about the Jews. They didn't care about the pagans or the very new young Christians who were just getting birth. They didn't want to be in community with those people. They weren't even considering those people. They just cared about the Jews. But he, back in his actual particular context, cared about being in community with other Jews. But I don't know if he meant all other Jews, or the ones who were Pharisees like him. I would ask him that question, like, who did you mean by community? I'd be very interested. Who else has a question for Hillel here, or a comment about the community? Or Susan, I think your hand is up.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's not a question, although I would ask him, what did he mean by community? For me, I think it's not just other Jews or a single sect and so on. It's a larger community of people, humanity, whatever. Because looking at times now, if we want to dialogue with people that have different opinions from us, if we're just stuck in a community of like-minded people, like Hasidic Jews or Reform Jews or whatever, or Democrats versus Republicans and so on, we're going to be split like binary and so on, black and white. But if we're in a bigger community, even if we only listen maybe and not participate, there's some growth in that, I think, if we're going to proceed some eons away on diplomacy. I mean, we have to have, I think, more than just our own. I think our own is good for support to maybe make us feel good and welcome and secure, but I don't think it's big enough for the whole world to have peace.
So you're interpreting the community as having a lot of diversity, and that's what he's telling us is don't separate yourself from the diversity of what's real.
Well, I don't know if he's telling you that, but that's
You're
my
telling us.
comment.
Yeah, really interesting. Okay, is there one more person who wants to comment? Trisha.
Yeah, I would ask him what he means by separate. If you interpret community as being the Jewish community or his Jewish community, what does that mean to separate yourself?
Wow, good question.
That you don't respect the rules, or what does that mean exactly to separate yourself?
I will bring into this conversation, we recently co-hosted Peter Beinart, the author of Being Jewish After the Destruction of Gaza, in a joint large teaching that he came to town to do. And our congregation was one of the sponsors. But if you read his book, he opens the book with a vision of, wouldn't it be great to be able to have Shabbat with people from all parts of the polarized Jewish community? Can we keep making Shabbat together? Like, even if you really disagree with each other, can you light candles, bless wine, break bread, even if you can't have a sane conversation because you just are so polarized? And he was saying at the beginning of his book, I long to do that. Like, he has friends he can no longer talk with, or they won't talk to him because they're mad at him about how he sees Israel-Palestine issues. And his vision is to sit together. And afterwards, a Reconstructing Judaism rabbi, Rabbi Brant Rosen, wrote a piece in the Jewish online publication Evolve, who said, Brant said, I'm not sure that's still the vision. Like, I don't know if I'm really, is that my goal, is to make Shabbat with, right-wing settlers and Netanyahu and Trump and, is that the vision, or do we need to draw a line and just, if you look at Protestant denominations, there are 400 plus of them. And how did that happen? Because it all started out as one, and now there are 400 because there were disagreements, but there were disagreements that were very, very serious, that people couldn't live without separating. Like right now in some Protestant denominations, the disagreement is over whether to respect gay and lesbian and LGBTQT, and some denominations are splitting off and they're separating from the community, becoming a new denomination because they can't tolerate that ongoing discrimination that they're required to do in the original denomination. So that question of do you want to separate yourself from the community or not? It's really a serious question, and it's serious for the Jews today. And I'm really interested in what exactly the nuances of what Hillel meant back then. And it's a very good quote, wisdom quote right now to be pondering, because, the stakes are high. The stakes are really high right now for, like, what is the vision even of being a Jewish community? Like, do you actually feel like you're part of a people with, right-wing settlers who are just slaughtering people. Is that your people who are doing that? I mean, so it's just like there's a lot of questions. Karen, I think I saw your hand.
Yeah, yesterday I spent Shabbat with my sister and my niece and their family, who are very strict Orthodox. And so it is sitting at the table. There are certain topics we don't broach together. And I'm not willing to give up my relationship with my family, to not go there. So I agree, we agree to not have the debates, but it's difficult, I have to say. And I do think in Rabbi Hillel's quote, I do think he meant first the Jewish community. From just being with an Orthodox group yesterday, I think that's key for them is their Jewish community.
I mean, in his context, he definitely meant that, and all those.
Yeah, in his context.
But we always reconstruct whatever the inherited. We still have to figure out for our day and age, what does the community mean? But that's really, thank you for sharing that, Karen. Yeah, like it's you're juggling different values, the value of family, the value of ethics. Those sometimes are in contradiction. I experience that sometimes within a much narrower band, but it's sort of like the band from mainstream Hillary supporter to Bernie, like in my family. But there's just there's conversations it's not worth having because we just get mad at each other and nobody anyway. And it's like we just want to love each other, so we don't talk about certain things.
Right. It's difficult. It's difficult.
So those are real values choices, I think, about what are you going to prioritize. And I'm curious about more. And maybe what Hillel was doing was just saying, look, this is something you have to grapple with. I'm not telling you the right answer, but I hand this down through the generations for you to grapple with it in your generation. And that's what we are doing here today. Okay, third wisdom quote. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Enid. Let's hear number 3 for today. Are you going to read it, Enid? This is such a good one. They're all good. Wait, yeah, Enid. Okay, there you go. Now your camera's not on. And you're unmuted, but we can't see you.
All right. Well, but you can hear me.
We'll count our blessings. Yeah.
Thank you. Rabbi Tarfon used to say, "It is not your responsibility to finish the work, but neither are you free to desist from it."
Wow.
That's a strong one.
It's really powerful. It's not your responsibility to finish the work, but neither are you free to desist from it. Who has a comment or question for Rabbi Tarfon? This one's not Hillel, it's Tarfon. Susan.
I don't.
Are you having trouble unmuting?
Got it.
Okay.
I think that it goes to, it ties in a way to, if you're not for yourself or your community. I think that when you see the work, whatever, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can, but Enid, I'm muting you again here. So, okay, there we go.
When you see something that has to be done, or whether it's to reorganize something in Judaism or in the world, or whatever the task is, but I'm thinking along the lines of Judaism, whatever. I think that if you're for yourself and for your community, you have to initiate something. I think the rabbi there is saying, you may not be able to finish it. Some things are so big that one person can't do them and maybe even one small community can't do it. But if you look away and you don't address the problem or the issue, that's not going to solve it. And it's not going to be good for you or the community if you see it as a problem.
Yeah. Thank you. Who else?
I'd like to offer tidbit possible.
Stacy, you're
Can
breaking
you
up.
hear me?
No, not very well. You're breaking up. Are you able to write in the chat box?
Okay,
Or maybe this is better.
I'm gonna try. I'm on my phone, so.
Good.
That's better.
Oh, this is better? Okay. I think it's about Tikkun Olam. I think it's referring to repairing the world.
Uh-huh.
That we're not, we can't finish it, but we can't desist from working on it as well.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
anybody else? What about a question you would ask? Rabbi Tarfon, Fran.
We're looking at it through the lens of our times, and he was maybe in the obvious building of the Jewish people, building of himself, what he was working on with other communities, with himself in that time, responsibility to finish. Maybe he was talking about himself, the work that I'm doing, and I need others. Whatever I'm working on with, it's not my responsibility to finish it. So he was speaking about himself. He needed help from others.
Yeah, and if that's what he was thinking about, his personal work, what would that have been that he was talking about here?
Right. It would have been the new Judaism. What am I building? What is where's this going to end up?
Basically saving Judaism.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I mean, you could look at it personally too. It's like, okay, I have a chore in the house to do. I don't need to finish it, but I can't stop doing it. You can look at it in a very micro sense too, if you want to motivate yourself.
Well, I find this quote enormously reassuring that it's all any one person, it's generational. We have the model of these guys, Hillel, Tarfon, who, they invested so much in their mission, but it took many, many more generations to complete even the sacred text that they were making oral contributions to it. So it's not even written down for a couple hundred years. And, there's lots more input into it, but they made their contribution. And I find that sort of reassuring for today, that you do what you can do while you're here on earth in your human body. You do the best you can, you make a contribution in some way, shape, or form, and there will be other generations, thank God, after you who also continue the human endeavor. Karen?
Yeah, I find it comforting also, because I can get overwhelmed with tasks. And he's saying, I think he's saying human progress and human evolution is bigger than your lifetime.
Yes.
It's way bigger. But if you don't put your piece in, it stops the flow.
That's right. There's really two sides of this. It's not your responsibility to finish it, but you better make your contribution.
But it is your responsibility to continue it, or else it stops with you. So that's really cool.
There's both some relief, but there's also some obligation in this
statement.
I don't think he's specifying what contribution anybody's making. Somebody could be a farmer and they're plowing fields and making sure there's more cultivation available to feed people. Whatever you are, make your contribution. Give your good energy to this world. Wendy. And then Enid.
I was thinking about generational work, and you just mentioned that. Some work is never finished, and some work will never be finished. And we continue to interpret texts and to change even the way that we recite scripture. And maybe we're not writing new things like went on for years and 1,000 years with rabbis, but we are making it new again, over and over and over again.
That's right. We're renewing old traditions. Yeah. And who knows? I mean, some of the things that we invent today are likely to go down and be considered Judaism. Like if you think about it, you know, a couple decades ago, you know, a few decades ago, Debbie Friedman started writing new Jewish feminist music, like May Har da, da, da. No, I'm not singing that right. Our Misha Berach song, Misha Berach Avotenu, the Misha Berach song that we sing all the time. And there was a time when I was sitting at a seminar with people from different denominations, and we were trying to figure out what we all shared in common. And some people started singing that song, and everybody from every Jewish denomination knew that song. It was like it had come from Sinai. And it was just a very recent song that now is just Jewish. It's how you do a Misha Berach in all these denominations. And there's some other songs like that too, that people just think of now as traditional Jewish music that were actually written like in your lifetimes, you know? So it's very interesting, like, you know, how do we do this? Okay, Fran has a question in the chat box here, which is how did this all get written down? So in the third generation of these Mishnaic rabbis, there was a rabbi called Judah Hanasi, Judah the priest, and he decided to turn it from an oral tradition into a written tradition. For the first time, the Mishnah was written by scribes. Till then, it was chanted as an oral tradition, so people basically knew it by heart. There would be an official chanter whose job it was to chant it, but everybody knew it by heart, and they could refer to any of it at any moment. But it's good we have the written version of it now so that we still have it. Enid, you were next, and then we're going to shift. Did you want to?
No, I just wanted to say that one of the beauties of Judaism is what we do in our lifetime, what we leave behind that is remembered, whether it's in our family or wherever it happens to be. So I really love L'Dor V'Dor, from generation to generation, because I think that's what it's all about. And Judaism, in some instances, depending upon which branch you belong to, it really doesn't change. And that's good, because that also leaves us with some tradition. But in other cases, we go forward, we change, but within that framework, we're all Jews. And so that was just my comment.
From generation to generation, L'Dor V'Dor, that's very beautiful. Yeah, that's very essentially Jewish. Yeah. Okay, so we are going to make a space now, because I said we would do this in every class, for sharing your own wisdom that you received through your generations or you passed on to children or nieces, nephews, whoever. We shared some last time. They were wonderful, and we're opening it up again. If you have a wisdom statement that you grew up with or that you created for your family, let's hear it. Wendy?
In my family, they said, don't drive drunk.
Well, that's smart. Okay. Diane is saying in the chat box, on my parents' gravesite headstone at the bottom, reaching across both, is the saying L'Dor V'Dor. That's beautiful. From generation to generation. Evie.
At our last session, you asked if we heard any that we do not believe in. And I was thinking, not from my parents, but from other people, I've heard God only gives us what we can handle. And I don't think that one's true.
Yeah, I think that's a fundamentalist Christian one somehow, but anyway, I don't really know, but yeah, thank you. Okay, who else has one? Anne. No, you.
Okay. Oh,
That's okay. We can't see you, but we can.
okay. There we go. Gosh, technology. I had shared this with you with Rabbi at the Seder that when our son was in college, he had a course in which the professors asked them, what is something that your parents, your grand, whoever raised you, that really sticks with you, that is a foundation? And Liam had said from his dad, he got always have a plan B. And from his mom, he got what works, works. And I was startled that he was actually listening. But Bill's a planner. And I was the one who said, as a therapist, whatever works.
Beautiful. So he
does it keep you sober? Does it, whatever it is, just do it.
Love it. That's really great. Okay, for couples in the room, we have some couples here. Some people have the wisdom, never go to bed angry with each other. What do you think about that? Don't go to bed angry with each other. Is that like even realistic? Is it useful? Anybody have an opinion? Susan?
Well, it's probably useful, but it's not always easy to do. But by the time the morning comes, you might feel better because, you weren't fighting during the night and you were able to sleep. But
Anybody else want to weigh in on that one? Okay, anybody else have a saying? Arena, do you want to speak to that? Right, you're on mute. I don't know if you're trying.
No.
There you go.
Yeah, I said it's not always easy to do, but it certainly in the morning when you're had the night to either look at it or what. I think if you can talk about it, you're more able to talk about it and, at least come to some in a reasonable, calm, quiet way, which you may not be able to do the night before, or even, so, the caring, the love is there always, but you have differences. So these things happen.
Thank you, Susan.
I forgot to say about my saying in my family. If you asked my girls, they'd say, my mom always says, life is not fair. And I remember that it came out of when they were little, they would say, so-and-so's mother lets her do this. And they don't get any punishment. And so-and-so's, and I always said, life's not fair, but you gotta keep going.
All right. Okay. Well, in my family, I was always, my kids tease me today that I used to, I had a saying, no matter what they came to me with, like, I have no friends at school, I broke my leg, I'd say, drink some water. But now we know more about electrolytes, so now I say, drink electrolytes. Funny, like fight dehydration was my major parenting principle. Probably not really, it's kind of a joke, but they tease me about it. Okay, well, I think that was very interesting, and we are going to do our Torah song, and then we're going to have our Yizkor closing. So our Torah song. For our teachers and our students and the students of our students, we ask for peace and loving kindness and let us say amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say amen. Speaking of very traditional music, that is a Debbie Friedman song from a few decades ago, but based on old Jewish words of Gemilut Chasadim, acts of loving kindness. Beautiful. So for our Yizkor moment, I know we're remembering a lot of people in this Zoom room. Most recently, Evie's husband, Mark. Shortly before that, our beloved Iris Newman. And I know people have also had personal losses as well. So let's open up some space for people can unmute who want to speak and let us know who you're remembering for this Yizkor.
I'm remembering my father, Laban Ben. I don't know if you say the mother's name first or the father's name first, but it's Brina and Moshe.
Right.
And also my friend Marcia Hyman. Her yahrzeit coming up in 7 days.
And I should have said your father too, Leonard Shore. So yes, very
Leonard Shore.
recently.
Iris Cutler.
And Iris Cutler, yes. Thank you. And I know people have losses they're remembering also that are not so recent. So
Etta Rish.
Etta Rish, we remember Beverly's children, Peter and Greg. Beverly, did you hear me say that? Remembering your children, just wanted to make sure they're named. And who else? Evie, are you? Okay, well, people can also hold in your hearts people you are remembering. And I'm going to offer Kaddish. And if you'd like to rise in body or in spirit, you are welcome to. Me too. Okay. I just have to find it for myself here. Okay, yes. Yit Gadal,
Yit Gadash, Me Rabbah,
V'yalma,
V'yalma Divrei Hirute, V'yal Lichma Hute, V'chayikon V'yomekon, Uvaye B'kol Beit Yisrael, B'kol Yuzman Karev, V'yimru Amen.
Amen.
Yesh Mama Rabbah, Nivarach,
Maya,
Ayalme, Almaya,
Bach, Beatar,
Amen. Not Harvey, I say.
Yitvarar V'yishtabach, Yitbar V'yitraman V'yitnaseh, V'yitadar V'yitaleh, V'yitalal Shemay V'yitaleh Le'elam Mikol Birchata
Min Shemaya,
V'shirata
Beal Kol Yis,
V'shvachata V'necheman
Bill.
Namiran V'yoma
Uya,
V'yimru Amen Uya Aseh Shalom
Shalom. Vim. Amen.
Yuhei Lama Rabba Min Shemaya
Amen.
V'chayi
Amen.
V'yol
Oh,
V'yol Kol Yisrael V'yimru Amen Oseh Shalom Ben Rama Uya Aseh Shalom Aleinu Kol Yisrael
V'imru,
Amen.
Ya'aseh Shalom,
Say shalom.
Shalom Aleichem.
Aleinu V'yal Kol Yisrael
Ya'aseh
Shalom
Ya'aseh
Shalom
Shalom
Shalom Aleinu
V'al
Kol Yisrael
Averim, apologies again for our tech troubles, and thank you for being incredibly perseverant and dedicated and getting into this class. I'm really glad everybody made it in. Hope we didn't lose anybody. And I'll see you for the third one, I think in a couple weeks, if not before. Hope to see you before then on May 9th for our Shabbat service at the Kennedy House.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Chag Sameach.
Yes.
Thanks, Rabbi, for doing the Yizkor.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Karen.
Yeah. Rabbi, I wanted to add two names, if I may. Friends of ours in Israel, Oscar Mendeleev and his wife Shelley's twin